Hey, Lauren, are you there? Lauren, can you hear me? Hey, Lauren.
Nick, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Tom. I thought Lauren was going to be taking care of,
Oh yeah, right.
and he's
Never
here,
mind. See,
so I don't need to get on the Matrox.
yeah. Thanks for
But he's got his hand raised. I don't know. He's unmuted right now, so should I just make him a panelist?
who is it? Lauren?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Cool. It's fine.
Cool. All right, thanks.
No problem.
Good evening. I'm Barb Noseworthy, the mayor, and welcome to the August 16th City Council meeting. Thank you. We will call this meeting to order and have a roll call, please.
Counselor Baxter,
Present.
Counselor Bosmans, Counselor Buell,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef,
Here.
and Mayor Noseworthy.
Present. Do we have a translator? Do we have the
Yes, Mayor. Sam Guzman is here.
Sam, thank you.
Hello, Sam.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Yes.
good.
Hello. My name is Sam. I'm with the Community Language Cooperative, and I'm here to interpret this evening's meeting. For anybody joining us through Zoom online, when we turn on the interpretation feature, please select the interpretation icon and select your preferred language, in this case, either English or Spanish. Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Samuel Guzmán y estoy aquí para presentar interpretación para la reunión de hoy. Cualquier persona que se reúne con nosotros vía Zoom o en línea puede escoger el icono de globo en su pantalla y elegir su idioma preferido, en este caso inglés o español. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I didn't have I'm going to read a land acknowledgement. It is a personal statement from me. It does not represent the individual views of other council members. For thousands of years, this region was home to numerous people, bands, tribes, and nations. Each had their distinct culture, artistic expression, and community mores. In particular, this region was the ancestral home of the Nuchu, Dene, Pueblo, Hopi, multiple Apache bands, and various other tribes and Latinx people who used and stewarded this land. I recognize that indigenous peoples were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands by the US government. It is therefore important to recognize that the narrative of this region has mostly been told from the dominant perspective without recognition of those who came before us and who to this day continue to thrive, create, and connect with this land. Thank you for your respect in my acknowledging this legacy. Now, we're going to go into any identification of actual or perceived conflicts of interest. Before we go to public participation, I would like to make just one quick announcement, which is that the chief is the acting city manager for us tonight. Thank you very much. All week, because our city manager was invited to Harvard to participate in an invitation-only program for city managers of, I think there's about 30 people, and was also allowed to bring one professional from the staff to go along as well. So this is a great professional development experience for Jose Madrigal, as well as a recognition for the city. So Chief, thank you, as always, for filling in. Now, public participation. I see some people have signed up, and I'm going to just kind of read through the instructions on that. This section of the agenda is set aside for the public to provide 3 minutes of comments or ask questions regarding items that are not scheduled for a hearing or public testimony, or that do not otherwise appear on this agenda. City Council will not respond to questions from the dais. Citizens should address their comments directly to the City Council. And as this is a virtual meeting, the avenues for public participation have been adjusted. We've received public comment before noon, and that has been in the packet. We will start with people in the audience first speaking and then go to virtual. And the 3-minute clock will show up on the screen. And if you see me raise my hand, you've got about 20 seconds or so to finish up. And I hate to do it, but I will interrupt you if you go over. So thank you. So let's see. The first person signed up is Dave Peters, please. You need to just state if you're a resident of the city or the county or elsewhere.
Good evening. My name is Dave Peters. I think most of you know me. I'm a resident of the city. So, good evening, City Council and Mayor. I'm here tonight as I'm not in favor of the lodger's tax ballot measure being considered tonight. Now, I assume the ballot measure will direct funds to affordable housing. I'm very much in favor of finding solutions for affordable housing, but I do feel there's some problems with this resolution tonight. Citizens really appreciated the recent Tabor Fund refund from the state, and the city would gain praise and trust if you refund excess lodger tax funds now. I really feel the odds of voters allowing the city to keep their refund is extremely low. Why would you spend a significant amount of taxpayer money on a ballot measure that probably has very little chance of passing? So some of you may recall the city passed a resolution for a grocery bag fee 9 years ago. The resolution was recalled, but city council was convinced citizens were for the fee and put it on the November ballot. So before starting a campaign against the ballot, we polled people on their views, which suggests about 2/3 of the voters would vote no. The ballot measure failed by a fairly wide margin. So my point is, I feel good about our ability to read voters on controversial issues. So I'm in a position to interact with a significant number of people from the city and the county, and I just polled over 40 people on the ballot measure. Not one person was in favor of the ballot measure. Further, when I told them the city could have issued you a refund probably a few months ago, they were certainly unhappy. Some volunteered for protest, other pledged money to lobby against the measure. Now, I understand that businesses are struggling to recruit employees, in part due to housing costs, but they are getting by. But did you consider senior citizens on fixed income who aren't getting by? They could really use the refund now. So what are you going to tell them if they call you and say, why didn't you just refund the money to us months ago? Also, I believe a lot of the public believes the lodger tax is to promote tourism, and lumping in, if you do it, affordable housing to use the excess fund is a real stretch. Also, the optics of the survey conducted for the ballot measure is not too good. It did not include a question asking if you approve assigning your refund back to the city. If you want people to spend dollars on affordable housing, then you need to have public meetings to show them detailed plans, which are backed up by an informal affordable housing consulting firm. And I guess I'm out of time. Thanks for listening.
There's just the thought, but I wanted to let you know time's up.
So, okay, I think a solution would get your plan together, sell it, and put it on the spring ballot for when you have a regular city council election. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is, and forgive me if I mispronounce names, Catherine Wagoner. And again, the clock isn't very large, but there is a timer on the screen at the top.
Okay, I'll be quick. Hi, thank you, everybody. I'm Catherine Wagner. I'm the Executive Director for the Durango Creative District. I'm here to say thank you and kudos for how the Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture Fund has been rolled out and implemented. We just went through the first round of applications, and the Creative Economy Commission did a phenomenal job in working with the DCD and getting the word out and meeting with a variety, dozens and dozens of different applicants who are so hungry for these funds. And I just wanted to emphasize that these projects with ongoing community benefit beyond just the cosmetic, but towards building networks within our community, not just based on tourist dollars, but building systems that will provide ongoing economic vitality for our creative community. It's aiding in this cultural economy's long-term health and fiscal stability. This feeds into affordable housing, advocacy for improved transportation, and the ongoing loop of social good in our community. And it's more than just murals or beautiful things, but we've received so many applications that are about the broader good and ongoing and cultural awareness. And I just want to kind of commend what the city's been able to do with those funds thus far. And we're seeing a huge need. So thank you.
Thank you. Jamie Wanzek.
Hello. I know, I'm not as tall. I know, I'm here. Hi, my name is Jamie Wanzek. I'm a freelance journalist, and I am a recipient along with Kirby Bennett of the Lodger Tax Grant. So I wanted to say thank you for supporting what we believe is an important project and how I want to support my community. I grew up here, and yeah, Kirby and I have been working on a history project the past few months. And we have, I think Durango, our history is often told through the white settler perspective, about mining and trains. And there are so many other stories that have not been told through the Indigenous and Chicano, to name a few perspectives. And we have been gathering oral interviews from people who grew up in Durango and have watched Durango change through gentrification and through, So we've been documenting these stories, and we want to share these stories with the community, and this funding will help us do that. And we hope that this funding can help support other artists, because something like this is a threshold for affordable housing and equity and social justice and change. And I think that if our community wants to support culture, you have to support these sorts of projects and these sorts of intentions. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Seth Fertney.
I'm here to comment about the reports that are going to come from Parks and Rec and Natural Lands regarding the use of pedal assist bikes on city trails, and consider myself reasonably well informed on the subject. I followed it closely. I've read national policy, state policy, city policy. It goes Forest Service policy, BLM policy. I've read it all. And at the end of the day, I'm fairly well convinced that being inclusive towards pedal assist bikes is beneficial to the community as a whole. And many of the concerns that have been voiced are overstated, and the benefits quite possibly are understated. So I wanted to just convey that. And in particular, I wanted to say that the BLM and Forest Service essentially invited the community, the municipality, to lead. They said, hey, we'll do kind of whatever's complementary, whatever the municipality wants to do, we're likely to complement that. And in part, Tres Rios District just recently put out their travel management plan prohibiting e-bikes on the BLM property near Durango, because they said, well, we didn't want to conflict with what you had going there, so we don't want to do it. So we've got this who's on first. And I think it's for the benefit of the community, to the advantage in our front country trail system, to invite people, especially those with disabilities, to use the tools that are available to assist them in their recreation and their fitness. The next thing I want to say is that I'm on the Parks and Rec board, and we just had a conversation talking about Smith Fields, and do we allow pickleball to use some of the parking area in the Smith Fields? And there was a big contention about, well, to a certain degree, the youth sports advocates said, well, we don't want to lose our parking because in the 4 or 5 events we have a year, there's not enough. And there's a solution to that, honestly, offered by the Fort Lewis College, saying, hey, well, we give you 150 spaces, don't worry about it. And yet they wouldn't withdraw and say, oh, okay, I guess we're good now. They kind of felt that this is our field, and that exclusionary thinking, I think, is troublesome and concerning. And I'd rather have a much more inclusionary thing saying, how do we work together? How do we manifest things to everybody's benefit instead of I've got mine and I don't care about what you got going. And I don't like that vibe. And it's something I try to, call out and try to address where I can. And yeah, I kind of think lastly, in 2016, this council or a council adopted rules that prohibited pedal assist bikes on the city trails for good reason. There was a lot of unknowns, and out of an abundance of caution, they said, maybe not. But if right now we had just followed state rules and said, hey, we think that pedal assist bikes are probably okay, and just allowed the state rules to govern, would we right now be imposing the restrictions that we currently have in place? And I'm fairly well convinced the answer is no. There's been no reports of environmental damage or safety hazards. And I think that the idea of extending a policy or allowing a policy to continue, that is honestly prejudicial and discriminatory without looking at it and saying, wait a second, perhaps not. Thank you very much. We're good.
But finish, please. Jody Fertney.
Good evening. I'm Jody Fertney. I live in the city of Durango. I'm a staunch advocate of allowing Class 1 pedal assist bicycles on all soft surface trails in the city of Durango and surrounds. I was recently injured. I fell, tripped and broke my foot, and I basically couldn't walk for 6 weeks. And then my doctor said, okay, you can get on a bike. And he said, hey, you can get on a bike on pavement. Well, I've had many friends that have been maimed or nearly killed, including my own husband, when they were on a road. And so I didn't feel comfortable. And so my release has been able to ride my Class 1 pedal assist bike on trails. And it's been a key part of my recovery. I really find the current policy that we have discriminatory against the injured, the disabled, the elderly. And recently, even I was on a trail and I'm riding my e-bike, and a man accosted me verbally for riding my e-bike. And I just think that policies like this are like the policies of old, where we told Black people that they couldn't swim in the pool. For white people, to me, that's what happened. Like, that's the things that came across my mind when this man was accosting me for riding my e-bike that I can only ride because I'm injured. So there's a woman that used to ride in the Gulch that used to live here. She was a paraplegic. She had a hand e-bike, a hand pedal assist bike. And so this policy would keep her from being in that space. And my injury is not as visible, maybe, but I also don't feel like I can be in that space. So I kind of just kept thinking about like Rosa Parks and on the bus and John Lewis and the Petraeus Bridge. And I just feel like I want to ride my e-bike. And I feel like, we have such little time on this earth, and it's like, let's get that policy so that people like in our situation can ride e-bikes. And I really would like each of you to comment on why we would have this policy even 1 minute past this meeting, because it's so discriminatory. So thank you for your consideration, and I hope that we can find a solution to this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. John Simpson.
Mayor Noseworthy, John Simpson, city resident. As the lodger's tax is written now, council's unwillingness to separate the question into two different questions will result in a ballot failure. Voters will opt for the $300 utility credit, no matter what use you decide on tonight. You're also likely to lose voters who are confused with this single ballot issue with 4 different questions on it. I suggest you bifurcate this question into 2 questions. One is the current residents' money, and one is the other people's money. The reason the lodger's tax just passed was the use of this other people's money slogan. The first question is the current people's money. And that question will relate to the 2021 and 2022 refunds. That question will likely fail but the city's balances are so large, it would not affect the city's ability to do that, to do businesses next year. The second more important question that could pass is the other people's money question. And it would ask voters to authorize the 3.25% lodgers tax rates, continue that in perpetuity. And council be allowed to reallocate that every year. This generic reallocation will allow future councils to use the money to meet the needs of the problems of the day that are not at the front burner right now. The temptation tonight may be to use it for parking or for housing in order to buy votes today. But this thinking can result in problems in the future when problems are much different than today. This reallocated forever tax, because this will be a forever tax, just might pass if you can concede the 2021 and 2022 revenues to the citizens now. Finally, I want to make sure this election is completely fair and people understand the issues. But so far, the message from the city has been misleading. First, the exact amount of the refund is unknown. My belief it's going to be $250 to $300 once you combine the 2 years. The citizens need to know that they're bypassing that much money. Next, I've heard that the citizens don't deserve this refund because they haven't paid for it. This genesis of the thought comes from the city's attorneys when they falsely stated a refund was impractical because it was impossible to identify the tourists who paid this tax. Council absolutely should prioritize the citizens when deciding how to refund this money. The citizens of Durango voted to increase the taxes. The taxes belong to the citizens. Non-residents have no standing in Durango. They don't deserve the money. City taxpayers have paid a lot to benefit the tourists. The citizens paid for the roads, the trails, the parks, the police, all services that the tourists are using. This excess money belongs to the citizens and everyone must support that law. Mayor Noseworthy.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Jasper Welch.
Good evening. I'm Jasper Welch, 2004 Glen Avenue. And first I wanted to start with my appreciation for the council. I've sat at your table for 8 years. And people asked me if I'd ever run again. And I said, well, I probably need a frontal lobotomy before I can make that decision. So I'm not running again. You don't have to worry. But some of you should run, right? If you don't like their decisions, why don't you run and stand before the public square? So I appreciate all your efforts. And I know that you have a lot of issues to deal with. Today, I wanted to comment a little bit on the lodgers tax. Back in the Anasazi period, 1980, I was involved as a chamber manager. We passed our first lodgers tax. And actually, it had some funding for transportation way back then. We included that in transportation. When I was approached to run the increase in the lodgers tax, they wanted to hire me. I refused. I said I would do it at no charge because I don't have any skin in the game except being a community member that wants to see Durango run well and be funded well. And so I did it as a volunteer, which people thought I was crazy, but I think it gave the moral authority to have the conversation, okay? So I'm not here to accuse the council of any wrongdoing or poor decision-making. I think you have a tough job and I've been there and I respect that. When the voters approved the increase, it was after, at that time, Melissa was the mayor and we had, 2 years of discussion trying to figure it out. And it wasn't easy and the community was involved. And we decided to do an allocation where one is we changed tourism to sustainable tourism as opposed to just anything. The council asked for discretion, some discretionary funds, which I would indicate that you can spend those funds. 11% of 2.5 million is about 300,000. You could spend those, but less the Tabor exclusion. You could spend those now on housing because that's council discretion. We also did arts and culture, and we created basically a long-term funding source for transportation, which would be about $1 million a year. And before that was debatable. Right now, it's one of the larger non-grant funding mechanisms for transportation. So we came together with a coalition and it passed. I think that we're seeing from the public that they would like to keep things spent with the conditions that they voted on. And I realize the vote was close, but you're going to have a lot of 3-2 votes on council, and you move forward. I think there's support for workforce housing. I was doing a little bit of work with Visit Durango. We polled our board, and the board supported workforce housing as opposed to just housing in general. And I think there is support for the arts and culture. And I think there's support for some additional money for transit. I think that would make a much better way of doing it. I would disagree with Mr. Simpson on just doing a free for all on the funding. I think the allocations help us to be responsible, help us to actually have thorough debates, and help us to give the council some guidelines. So I think the allocations are a good thing. And then finally, just to kind of wrap up, I think that part of what Durango needs right now is some open debate and respect for the council. And you guys have a tough job. If you don't like the job they're doing, in April 2023, you can run for office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. West. Has anyone come late that had wanted to speak? You can sign up. Okay, please. I see 2 hands. Please come up and sign up, and we'll call you, and then we'll go to, yes, just sign in, and Kirby as well. Then after those speak, we'll go to anyone from virtual.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me just call you up once I get it. Stay up there. Okay. Mr. Dale, I cannot read your last name, but please. Rogels, please come on up. Again, you'll have 3 minutes, and there will be a clock at the top if you can see that.
Okay, I won't take 3 minutes, I promise. But I agree with, I think Jasper was his name. You guys are doing a hard job. I'm on several boards myself in different areas, and some of them are really tough. But I also have a problem with taking something you sold to your Durango residents and then trying to manipulate it to something else. I mean, you sold it as a lodger's tax for a specific reason. I believe it should stay that way. Just tax and spend isn't going to get us anywhere as a city, as a county, as a country. We need to stop at some point and let the citizens decide, is this a tax I want to do? Do we want to, 2% tax increase so that we can build affordable housing? If we do, then let's do it. That's up to you guys. And I agree with everything everybody said tonight. I agree with all of it. We need it. It's nice. It's great. But let's be open and honest with everybody in Durango and not try to manipulate things to something else. So I just hope you guys can see where when you do this, it causes a lot of distrust in this council. And that doesn't need to be that way. You should say, hey, we need more money so we can build affordable housing, we can build more trails, and we definitely need parking. So let's just go add a tax. People's going to support it if you're honest and open with them. Give them back their $300 and let's move on. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Kirby Bennett. Dale, I do believe you're a city resident, correct? Yeah. Again, if you'll indicate if you live in the city or the county.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Kirby Bennett, and I'm a resident of the city. Along with my collaborator, Jamie Wanzek, we received funding through the Lodgers Tax Fund going towards arts and culture. And Jamie and I are working on what's called the Whole Histories Project. It's a multimedia history and storytelling initiative seeking to give voice to the vibrant BIPOC communities that have always been connected to this area, that have helped shape this landscape. And it's an honor to receive support from the city to move this project forward. And I think that ties to the fact that I believe that artistic expression empowers intellectual inquiry, and those are pillars that uphold civic engagement. And our project is at the intersection of those communal elements, as it helps to strengthen civic dialogue and organizing. And it's an honor to receive support from the city, and this will be an ongoing project, and we hope to be fortunate enough to receive funding again. And also, I believe this is an example of what can be achieved when the city puts money toward arts and culture. Those are tethered to reflecting on history and reflecting on the present, and how we can strengthen our community and improve our community. And so I do hope that more funding for arts and culture will continue going forward, and hope to continue to be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you as well, Kirby. Has anyone in the attendee list raised their hand?
No, Mayor, no one on the attendee list has raised their hand to speak.
All right, then I'll thank all participants for your public participation and your statements. Thank you for coming out and being part of the democratic process. All right. Next, we have operational updates, and I believe we're going to have the let's folks leave. Thank you. Thank you all for coming out. Next, we're going to have the wildfire and watershed protection presentation by Alison, Lehmann, and Sean. Are anybody else coming up? Okay. Alison, thank you.
Let's bring it up.
Or maybe it looks like there's two.
Neither of those, right?
No.
Okay, so let's just
I apologize. We're just getting my presentation.
Wildfire
Probably, yeah. And it's just gonna be. Geez, I don't see. Oh, the PowerPoint.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Just up in the corner.
Great. Thank you, Ben. You saved me. Hi, my name is Alison Lehmann, Wildfire and Watershed Protection Fund Coordinator, and I'm going to give you a little background on my position. First, I'd like to thank the City Council for allowing me to present this evening. And I want to thank Sam. I can't see you, but I appreciate your translating. It's important community concern to be prepared for wildfire. So we appreciate your role. So what I want to explain is what the Wildfire Watershed Protection Fund is. In 2021, the City of Durango, La Plata County, and Durango Fire Protection District created an intergovernmental agreement. And that agreement was focused on streamlining wildfire mitigation so that resources could be pooled, whether that be funding or whether that be equipment. The way to kind of be the most efficient at completing mitigation is to kind of pool those resources. So as part of that intergovernment agreement, a position was created. It's called Wildfire Watershed Protection Fund Coordinator. And that is how I am here today.
I was hired in April, so I've been here all of 4 months. My position is located in La Plata County Office of Emergency Management. And Shanla Garza is here with me today. That's the director of the Office of Emergency Management. What a main focus in my role is creating funding opportunities so that mitigation is possible on private lands. So right now we see the opportunity for funding through public lands programs or even partnerships with public lands, but there's really a lack of opportunities for residents who want to protect their homes. So in addition to funding, education is another big component. And I'm really excited about some of the grants I'll get to talk to you about today because education is a part of all of those grants. So what the kind of big emphasis is where Watershed ties in is completing wildfire mitigation in advance of a wildfire incident means that you'll have healthier forest conditions. You'll decrease the impact that a wildfire can have to the community. And that's a huge tie-in with, that's a huge tie-in with the City of Durango strategic plan. So the strategic plan, one of the 7 goals is environmental sustainability and resilience. And what the Wildfire Watershed Protection Fund is looking to do is change what a wildfire could do on the ground. So where we live in a time and climate where wildfire is part of living in Durango, living in La Plata County. That said, we can prepare our forests so that when we have a fire, it doesn't severely impact soils. It doesn't burn at such a high heat that then we see the flooding that occurred after 4/16. That has a huge impact on the Florida watershed. That is the city of Durango's drinking water. With only a small amount of supplement from Animus. So the impacts would be tremendous. I'm talking about in the billions of dollars if that watershed and our community were to be impacted from a wildfire in that area. So the effort that this program is doing is not only long-term, but also has a great amount of benefit for the community as far as resilience and kind of being sustainable in the long term, post-fire, post climate changing or in increase in rain events, things of that nature. Next, I'm going to talk to you about grants. And I had mentioned a big component of all the grants is education. So I am happy to say that with the grants I'm going to talk to you about this evening, we are focusing on private lands, and that's huge for our county to be able to have that accomplishment and be able to steer people to a place where they can talk to someone about what funding is available. I'll take you through the grants from the top, and to keep the slideshow, so this slide presentation short, I just have everything on one page, but WIN is water infrastructure improvements for the nation. It's actually Environmental Protection Agency funds that are being funneled through the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And the Durango Fire Protection District is the financial recipient of the award. They will be acting as fiscal agent through Wildfire Adapted Partnership, who most likely you're familiar with. They presently do a lot of work in the community, and we will be using their model. So this is where that tie-in with homeowners, it will start to occur. Homeowners who have a wildfire risk assessment can then be eligible to participate in getting mitigation completed. They can select a contractor of their choice and then be eligible for up to 50% reimbursement of their project. That grant is specifically in the Florida watershed. So the project area starts just north of Lehmann Reservoir. You'll see it travel along County Road 240, and then around Edgemont is where that project area will stop. So homeowners in that project area are eligible for the funding. We also have and I should add, monitoring will be completed by Mountain Studies Institute. So that's another partnership that's involved with this collaboration, completing the monitoring, as well as creating a baseline, which is really important because what would happen post-fire is we need to restore the watershed in the Florida. And so the analytics that we'll start to measure now will provide that baseline that will be very valuable following any future incidents. Next up, COSWAP is the Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Plan. And there are a few grants that the county is a recipient of through this particular program, this grant program that's through the Department of Natural Resources. Very similar to WIN, we have a number close to $1 million, and both of these are matching grant programs. So by the time that you look at the money that's invested in projects, invested by personnel, and then invested through this grant, we're talking close to $4 million in wildfire mitigation that will be achieved between now and 2026 in a landscape in our county. So that's a huge accomplishment. The program, as I said, would be very similar with the exception of it's also going to focus on a lot of community-owned lands. And what that means is HOAs that have commonly owned lands will also be eligible for participation and be able to participate in the match. Durango Fire Protection District will be completing much of the mitigation on this project. And between the two projects, the WIN we're targeting 300 to 325 acres. COSWAP is 360 HOA or commonly owned acres and 190 private acres. So there will be a considerable amount of acreage that will have those resiliency and sustainability benefits that I spoke about previously in terms of the city strategic plan. And then Mountain Studies Institute, in addition to installing an automated monitoring system on the Florida River, they'll also be organizing a citizen science corps, a group to be trained and participate in going out and recording on water conditions. So that'll be an exciting new opportunity for residents in our community. The workforce grants are also through COSWAP, and what that means, workforce is kind of how it sounds. The idea is to build the kind of skilled labor pool in completing mitigation work. And one grant is aimed in, I'm sorry, let me back up real quick on the project area for COSWAP. That will essentially be Edgemont, Baby Bear, Durango Hills, northish, and then it'll follow the County Road 240 corridor down just outside city limits at Timberdale Subdivision. So that is our project area. So the workforce grants, Southwest Conservation Corps will begin a mitigation project on county-owned lands. Those are located within and adjacent to Edgemont Subdivision. That project will be 18 acres and teach a new crew how to do saw skills and learn about the benefits of mitigation. And then what we'll see perhaps as early as this fall is a state wildfire inmate fire team who will be coming to La Plata County to complete roadside mitigation throughout the county. And then finally, in partnership with Wildfire Adaptive Partnership, the county will be updating the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, or CWPP, in 2023. So again, just a short amount of time, but this is what you can do when you dedicate staff to, living and thinking about this and trying to do what we can to make resources available for the public. So that's very exciting. And this wouldn't be possible without the partnerships and collaborations that our organizations already here in our community who, if not weekly, then I'm meeting with probably monthly. And so this is a list here with the first one, the Wildfire Advisory Board, being a board that reports to the La Plata County Commissioners. I'm the liaison for that board to the county. And among other really exciting things that you'll see in the next few months coming from that board is a centralized location for all wildfire related things, everything you can think of online. We're going to have a website available for the public to find contractors, learn about their home ignition zone, and learn about home hardening, and have all the resources available so that they are prepared and ready, whether it be because they need to evacuate or it's because they're just preparing their insurance policy. So that is the conclusion of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have for me.
Thank you, Allison. Questions for Allison?
I was just curious, do we have a city representative on the board?
Yeah, Amy Schwarzbach is on the board as well as the mayor.
For council, what I did want you to know is that the county is working on developing a budget that we will work together with. And what that will look at, it'll include how much each partner has contributed, both in cash and in kind, what we have spent, hopefully, if we get all of this data together, what next year's budget would look like, because we are going to need matching funds money for this, even some of these grants. And then a request of from the city, and then the request from the county. So hopefully the process is the county manager and the city manager are working on that together, and we will see it through the budget process coming forward. And thank Shauna and Amy as well for serving on this. And Mayor Pro Tem Youssef, it was a pleasure to work with you to get this started. So, and
Oops, sorry. I also just wanted to say welcome. Thank you. It's nice to have you
Thanks.
on board
Appreciate that. Thank you.
for the community. It's great.
Yeah.
And the one thing I do also want to say is that you're still working on this big meta group, which I want everyone to understand. We're trying to make this quilt of what the fire mitigation looks like. So if we've got patches right now, where do we have holes or gaps and what needs to happen? So that is an ongoing project as well, led in many ways by the Watershed and Wildfire Protection Fund, Wildfire and Watershed Protection Fund.
Yeah. Yeah, correct. And that map, that visual that you were just describing will be part of the Wildfire website. So coming soon, people will be able to see that and see all the work.
Thank you. Thank you for
Great.
coming.
Thank you.
Next, we have Tommy Crosby with the Lodgers Tax Arts and Cultural Grant Funding update.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm excited to be before you tonight providing an update on the first round of our lodgers tax arts and culture funding. You'll notice in the slides I'm presenting tonight, many of them are accompanied by photos or visuals of various projects that were funded through this first round of arts and culture funding. You'll notice on this first slide, we have a sculpture by Jeff Wise named The Celestial Sailor. It depicts a half moon riding a kayak, and it's going to be installed at the 32nd Street pedestrian bridge. What's cool about this one, it's going to be visible from the river, the trail, the road, and the train. Pretty fitting with the kind of kayak culture and water culture that we have in Durango. I want to start out talking with some of the goals that we tried to keep in mind during this first round of arts and culture funding. We really wanted to use this as a resource to enhance the quality of life for folks in Durango by coordinating, empowering, and really celebrating the community's creative and cultural resources. We wanted to create new opportunities to support local arts and culture while at the same time strengthening some of our cornerstone arts and culture organizations here in Durango. On the left side of this slide, you'll see an example of a sculpture by Alexander Bond. His project that received funding is titled Our World. This is eventually going to replace the temporary sculpture outside of the Carnegie Building on 12th and 2nd. What's great about Alex's project is he's facilitated an 8-week youth after-school program focused on metalworking. Each of these youth members of this metalworking cohort are going to be paired with an adult mentor. Both the adult and the youth member are going to receive a stipend for their participation, and they're going to collaboratively create a new metal sculpture to permanently be placed in front of the Carnegie Building. A little bit of context around how we arrived at this point. So in April of 2021, Durango voters approved an increase in the lodgers tax, specifically with a carve out for arts and culture funding. In January of 22, Council crafted the lodgers tax policy, which the Creative Economy Commission then took and interpreted into our lodgers tax arts and culture funding application. In May of 2022, the Creative Economy Commission launched that application. That first round closed up in June. And at the end of July, just last month, the Creative Economy Commission issued its first round of funding. At the bottom of this slide, you'll notice a mock-up of a soon-to-be painted mural. It's a serpent motif by community member Maddie Sanders. She identifies as Mojave and Muskoke, and she wanted to activate this underutilized retaining wall at the Camino and Main intersection that otherwise would go unnoticed. It's at one of those central intersections within Durango that will receive many views and is a fantastic job of activating otherwise unused spaces with public art. The intent that we carried into this first round of arts and culture funding was to really show a wide array of projects that represent the full breadth of the arts and culture community in Durango. We really, again, wanted to celebrate this new funding stream as a new source of hopefully sustainable funding for our arts and culture community here in Durango. The intention was to both fully and partially fund as many projects as we could with this first round funding. And again, just showcasing the appetite and need for arts and culture funding in Durango. On the left hand of this slide, you'll notice a mock-up of Stillwater Music's new and improved multi-purpose performing arts venue. The construction of this 120 to 150 person capacity theater. It was designed with the intention of being a malleable space that could be used for a wide variety of year-round performances and classes. To give you a brief overview of our applicant pool, we received 35 applications with over 15 types of different projects. The requested funding amount was over $1 million with $250,000 available to distribute in that first round. On the left-hand side, you'll see a playbill for the half-life of Marie Curie. Merely Players was one of our award recipients from the first round of arts and culture funding. And they're going to be using those fundings for about a week and a half long performance of the half-life of Marie Curie. And Merely Players, they're dedicated to bringing high quality year-round live performance art to Durango. The review process that the Creative Economy Commission took on was quite thorough and extensive. Using this set of evaluation guidelines, the review committee looked at each individual application, spending over 31 hours reviewing these applications. A quick overview of the 19 different arts and culture organizations and individuals that received funding during this first round. This first round resulted in, again, 19 projects, with 4 of those being permanent pieces of public art that will be gifted to the city. The Creative Economy Commission was intentional with using these funds to support local BIPOC artists with this new revenue stream. And like I mentioned earlier, the Creative Economy Commission wanted to not only fund new projects, but we really wanted to support some of those cornerstone arts and culture organizations that have really established the creative and cultural fabric of Durango. On the left hand of this slide, you'll see the work that Jamie and Kirby are doing with their Whole Histories project. They chatted with y'all a little bit during public comment about the goals and focus of their project. It's an archival and multimedia storytelling project that tries to give voice to some of those untold stories that we don't hear about in Durango's everyday history. One of the cool parts about their project is they're going to be releasing a podcast series. You can see in Kirby's hand here, he's got a microphone as one of the arms of their multimedia project. So next steps, what does this look like? You'll see in your agenda tonight that there's a supplemental appropriation request for the second round of Lodgers Tax Arts and Culture funding for 2022. Our second round of funding closes August 31st of this month, and that will lead to the Creative Economy Commission reviewing and approving applications at their September 27th meeting, leading to a year-end update that I'll provide once that funding has been issued. On our last slide here, you'll see a mural that hopefully you've glimpsed downtown Durango, Love Letters by Jen Rawling. Her and a team of dedicated local artists spent over 300 hours taking over the south wall of the Crossroads building in the peak of tourist season, entertaining passerbys, telling them stories of the mural, invited them to take photos and ask questions as that mural went up. I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have about the first round of arts and culture funding or the supplemental appropriation that you'll find later on the agenda this evening.
Questions from council?
I think it's very interesting how diverse the projects are that you've included and awarded. I really applaud that.
The work that the subcommittee did with Tommy, and was there four CEC members? Three CEC members. I mean, the application process, the going over, it was super intense, and what they presented to the entire Creative Economy Commission, and then, got feedback from us on it, was just impressive. And I couldn't be happier with the projects that we decided to move forward with, and then even hearing about some potential coming forward in the next steps. And it's super exciting how many permanent new pieces of art will be in Durango, and then it's just remarkable. So thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah, I was going to thank you guys as well. It's so exciting to see this actually coming into fruition. Sounds like you have a really good division of responsibility for the implementation of these grant funds. It takes a lot of work to sort through all the applicants and to make these funding, but I think it's going to make for such a richer community going forward. And I'm so thankful that this passed and that we have this funding going forward. It's very exciting. So thank you so much.
And Tommy, I'll just add, first of all, can you make certain you send this slide presentation to us and possibly put it up appropriately on the website, either with the Creative Economy Commission, things like that. But I also think it's an important story to tell in the community of this first round of awards. So, and a big thank you to the Creative Economy Commission for doing the heavy lifting of all the reading and evaluating. So could you go back just for a moment to the criteria? I thought that was very interesting. Yeah. So I wanted to just acknowledge, I thought you put a lot of thought into that as to how you would evaluate those projects. So thank you.
Well, and I think it was helpful, our discussions around, creative economy and arts and culture and what that means in Durango. You and I worked a bunch with that. And then we brought that, as well as the rest of the Creative Economy Commission, to these 10 points, which Tommy very nicely was concise for us and trying to encapsulate everything that we were talking about. So yeah, it was great.
And those evaluation guidelines are in the application for people applying. I'm assuming.
Correct.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're
so
very
much.
welcome. Thank you for the lodger's tax policy that y'all put together, and we'll make sure to make these slides publicly available.
Okay, next we have Turi Nykum for an update on Parks and Recreation and the Natural Lands Preservation Advisory Board's discussions and recommendations to allow e-bikes in Durango's mountain parks and open space areas. I wanted to say that it's my understanding this is information only. Council will not be making any decisions tonight. I'm looking at Turi. You're going to come back with
Correct.
a probably based on tonight's conversation, maybe an additional discussion point. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're just here to give you some information tonight, kind of recap what the process we've gone through over the last many years, and kind of queue you up for a further conversation where we can hopefully get some information and direction on how to proceed with e-bikes. Let me go ahead and share this real quick so the audience can see it. Do you see it on here? Show all windows? I have it up, but yeah, we need Ben's assistance here real quick. There it is. There we go. Okay. Okay. Thank you again, Madam Mayor, members of council. My name is Turi Nykum. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director. With me tonight is Amy Schwartzbach, who many of you all know. She's our Natural Lands Manager and has actually been quite intimately involved in the e-bike discussion with our community. And again, tonight is really just to kind of recap what we've been going through over the last several years, but specifically what we've been doing this year in 2022 with the three boards that have had interest in the e-bike discussion. Kind of get you set up for further discussion, hopefully in September, maybe at a study session. And then also tonight wanted to make sure that you're fully aware and share the recommendations that came from the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board and the Natural Lands Preservation Advisory Board. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy, who's just going to kind of quickly do some recap of some information and kind of a timeline recap as well.
So I have Tom to thank for reminding us to inform everybody of what Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3 means when we talk about e-bikes in our community. And that comes out of the state House bill. So in April of 2015, the state of Colorado passed a bill that served three purposes regarding e-bikes. It amended the definition of motor vehicle to differentiate electric assisted bicycles into those three different classes. It also exempted electric assisted bicycles from registration as you would your motorized vehicle and heading to the DMV when you get a car. And third, it gave local jurisdictions the authority to allow or prohibit e-bikes on paths and trails. So the Class 1, if I move that out of the way, what Class 1 means, this is a big one to understand for our community is, and these are the definitions straight out of that Colorado House bill. It means electrical assisted bicycle equipped with a motor that provides assistance only when the rider is pedaling, and that assistance ceases to provide, ceases to provide assistance when the bicycle reaches a speed of 20 miles per hour. Class 2 is unique in that that assistance continues to assist the rider even when they stop pedaling. Lots of folks recognize Class 2 bikes by the throttle, a little bit more like a motorcycle, but that still caps out at a speed of 20 miles an hour. And then the class 3 goes back to a pedal action has to be there for that motor to assist the rider. And then it maxes out at 28 miles per hour. So as we talk about our policies, we are differentiating those 3 classes. Hey, thanks for assistance. So going back several years in how the city has been involved in an e-bike process for our community. Back in 2016 and 2017, our joint advisory boards, that would be the Multimodal Board, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and the Natural Lands Preservation Advisory Board. They had joint board meetings open to the public, and then those boards went back to their respective meetings and discussed e-bikes at length, and that started broadly on Durango trail systems, narrowed down to the Animas River Trail, and for a 1-year duration from 2017 to 2018, we had an e-bike trial period specific to Animas River Trail. 2018, city ordinance was changed on a positive results of that trial period, and we now allow class 1 and class 3 e-bikes on our hard surface trails. Again, those are only the pedal assist varieties. In 2019 to 2020, that super board came back together and we had our. Did I typo that one?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Yes. So see, I was on the timeline and not the details. So thank you for keeping me honest. So 2019-2020 was another long run of that joint advisory board component and respective board discussions. This time the focus was on e-bikes on our natural surface trail systems. That led to a 2020 to 2021 trial period at the Twin Buttes Natural Surface Trail System. That trial period did involve a lot of public engagement, including trail intercept surveys. The trial period also was lengthened because of this thing called COVID. So our trial period got a little bit longer and was a little bit more challenging to have a lot of volunteer engagement face-to-face at a trailhead, but we still tackled it and got a lot of feedback during that. And then during the 2021 season as well, city staff, Durango Mesa Park Council, obviously, we were focusing additional efforts on acquiring phase 1 of Durango Mesa Park and conversations that took e-bikes into account for the future trails to be developed at Durango Mesa Park.
I'll go ahead and jump to 2022. Following a similar format to 2016, 2017, we reconvened all 3 boards, the super board, which was the Natural Lands Preservation Advisory Board, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and Multimodal Board to talk about class or e-bikes in Twin Buttes, Dalla Mountain Park, Overend, and Horse Gulch. We brought them together on February 2nd, had a great big meeting. It was a virtual meeting because we were still kind of in COVID. We presented the data and the information from the trial period that was concluded in December of 21. And then we had some general discussion out of that discussion. We came to the conclusion to create a subcommittee, a joint board subcommittee where 3 representatives from each board would reconvene and talk about e-bikes in more depth on the natural surface trails. That board met in April, May, and June. And at the conclusion, they felt like they had enough information to go back to their respective boards and talk about it at their respective boards. I will kind of back up and say in February, after the February 2nd joint board meeting, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board at their February 9th meeting decided to go ahead and make a recommendation to City Council on e-bikes, and I'll get to that in just a second. So they kind of jumped ahead of the process a little bit. The Natural Lands Preservation Advisory Board went through the process, listened to the discussions, and at their July meeting, they made a recommendation. And then the Multimodal Advisory Board, after discussion, could not come to a conclusion or a consensus on what they would like to recommend to City Council, so they did not make a recommendation at the end of the process. I should also note through the 2022 time period, we did pass an ordinance to allow Class 1 e-bikes at Twin Buttes. So that also happened during this whole process, and I just want to make sure that you were aware of that. Also, throughout that discussion process, we got the services of a conservation easement attorney to review our conservation easements. I think there are 7 of them in total, 8 total, but we're not really looking at Oxbow Preserve for e-bikes, but 7 in total throughout the 3 areas. And those are located at Horse Gulch, Overend, and Dalla. They reviewed 2 of those easements to see what we needed to do legally in order to allow e-bikes within the conservation easement areas. That came back and it was concluded that we would need to go through an amendment process through La Plata Open Space Conservancy to allow e-bikes on those conservation areas, which make up a good amount of the lands on those within those areas. So we provided that information, and the Natural Lands Preservation Advisory Board made 2 recommendations. The first one is to move forward with looking at the 3 conservation easements at Horse Gulch to go through an amendment process through the Open Space Conservancy to allow e-bikes in that area. Their second recommendation was to not proceed with amending conservation easements at Dalla and Overend. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Board in February, as I mentioned, made the recommendation to follow State House Bill 1174, which can be interpreted by some that e-bikes should be allowed everywhere. And that's what they're recommending, is that we pursue conservation easement amendments at all locations. And again, the multimodal board did not make a recommendation. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And we just wanted to give you a bit of a heads up that we wanted to bring this to you in September. And we'll present a lot more information at that time, but we can open it up to questions and maybe answer any questions that you may have to help you get prepared for September.
Questions from council? Tori, did you say multimodal board did not make a recommendation?
They, in our discussions with Sarah Hill, who's a liaison, staff liaison, they could not come up with the wording or the recommendation that they wanted to, that they would want to make, so they decided not to make a recommendation.
So I read the minutes from that meeting and there was a motion made, but it wasn't approved. So there's just not agreement, I think, on the board for that at this point.
And do we know if they're going to be working towards some kind of recommendation for multimodal?
I'm liaisoning the meeting on Wednesday. Is that tomorrow night? Yes. And so I'll bring that information back to you. I don't think that they said that during their previous meeting.
In your study sessions and everything you've done over the past years, I know Durango Trails 2000 is a big supporter and helps with our trails a ton, especially our soft surface trails. Are they a part of these discussions? Do they have? Yes. Okay. Perfect. Just making sure that we're incorporating people that are in our community that are active participants.
We'll say we had a lot of feedback.
I've had a lot of feedback, so I can only imagine what you've had.
I'm curious about feedback, and I might be it through the multimodal or others on, I wrote down Jody Furtney's comments about injured, disabled, and elderly. And I was curious if you're getting a significant input from either the Southwest Center for Independence or any other group that would feel that they don't have access to trails because of.
I can't say that we've received anything from the Southwest Center for Independence or any other specific group that's representing disabled people. But we did get quite a bit of comment individually from people requesting that we look at that issue a little bit differently. We do have a policy, other powered mobility devices, OPDMDs. And that is another subject or topic that I know the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board is interested in bringing up as well. So.
And both those topics have come through the Natural Lands Board, but no, we also haven't gotten a lot of feedback from that type of resource.
And the Southwest Center for Independence is represented on the Multimodal Advisory Board, which is why I was curious that they weren't making a recommendation. Other questions at this moment?
Thank you for your time. We'll look forward to getting it back in front of you in September.
Thank you. Counselor Baxter, I appreciate you filling in on the multimodal, and it would be, in particularly of me, I would be interested in their thoughts if they can reach some kind of consensus on a recommendation. And particularly because that board seeks, has constituent-based representation. I'm particularly interested in the elderly and disabled and what they'd be saying about that. Okay, now we come to the review of the consent agenda. The consent agenda is intended to allow the city council by a single motion to approve matters that are considered routine or non-controversial. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests an item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Items removed from the consent agenda will be considered under agenda item 9. Can we have a reading of the consent agenda, please?
Yes, item 7.1 through 7.4 are approval of minutes. Excuse me. 7.1 is for the July 27, 2022 City Council joint meeting with the Durango Fire Protection District. 7.2 is for the City Council special meeting on July 27, 2022. 7.3 is for the City Council study session on August 2nd, 2022. 7.4 is for the City Council regular meeting on August 2nd, 2022. Items 7.5 and 7.6 are discussion and possible action items. 7.5 is regarding appointments to the Business Improvement District, the Land Use Board of Adjustment, the Creative Economy Commission, and the Election Commission. 7.6 concerns a resolution to amend the 2022 budget for lodgers tax, arts, and culture funding. And then lastly, item 7.7 is final reading of ordinance O-2022-27, amending chapter 27 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Durango, Land Use and Development Code by the amendment of chapter 2, 3, and 7 related to regulations of accessory dwelling units, otherwise known as ADUs, and definitions, and declaring an effective date.
If I may ask a
Thank you.
question before
Yes.
we have a motion. There were 3 recommended changes to the minutes to the meetings. Were those incorporated into those?
I think we got the minutes updated for the joint meeting with the Durango Fire Protection District. I did that piece this morning.
Right, but Faye responded to me on the other 2, but she didn't say that she'd made the changes.
Okay. I apologize. I'm a little outside of that conversation
Okay.
for the other 2.
Then
Would you like a continuance?
Well, no, I could just pull them from it and then we could just amend it and make sure that they're accurate because I didn't go back and reread them afterwards. So,
Perfect.
but let me figure out which ones those are. So that would be, were you going to ask if there were any that we need?
Yeah, that's what I was going to do. Does anyone have any items to pull from the consent agenda?
Yes, I do. So that would be the city council meeting of August 2nd. So 7.4 and 7.4.
Okay, any other items to be removed from the consent agenda?
Would you like a motion?
Actually, I just realized I did not call for any perceived conflict of interest. So before we.
Yeah, you did.
Did I?
Yeah,
Okay.
You got that. You got it.
Man, I was just thinking, did I do that? Okay, I would like a motion. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item 7.4.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
No.
Let's have a roll call or a vote, please.
Counselor Buell,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef.
Yes.
Counselor Baxter,
Yes.
and Mayor Noseworthy.
Yes. Counselor Baxter, do you want to talk about 7.4.
Yes, on the city council regular meetings for August 2nd, there were a couple of things that weren't quite accurate. One of them was on page 27, during the conversation of the survey results from the original survey for the lodgers tax reallocation. And it was under the section where Councilor Bosman said something, and the minutes picked it up as he said more input was needed other than just the results of a survey that didn't include the refund option and has 910 respondents. And we know that it was, I believe it was 93 respondents. I said somewhere between 90 and 100. So if we, what I'd like to do is change that to make that accurate, that one. And then on the same city council meeting on item 13.4, where we were discussing the CRC, the minutes say that I said that I have no problem with the discussion being on the agenda, but saw no reason for the board to have a meeting without a liaison present. In reality, what I said was, but I saw no reason for the board not to have a meeting without a liaison present, and that they had done so in the past and that it had worked. So I wanted to correct that and have that changed. Those are just the two changes, if everybody agrees with those. So I would go ahead and.
Any thoughts or questions of Councilor Baxter? Can we have a motion?
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve item 7.4 with those changes.
I'll second.
I don't think there's any discussion. No, we've already had it. Okay, let's have this vote.
Counselor Buell,
Yes.
Counselor Baxter,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef,
Yes.
and Mayor Noseworthy.
Yes. Okay. Now we'll go into public hearings. And the first public hearing, we have no legislative public hearings, but we have a quasi judicial public hearing on the South Fork preliminary plan subdivision. And Mark, you're going to be presenting this one and the next one, correct? Great.
Do share first in Zoom and then maximize it.
Yeah, go to Zoom. Shoot.
I'm not sharing it. Why is it?
I can Zoom real quick. You gotta share screen.
Why is it doing that?
Oh, you know what? If it's in the corner.
Is it already being shared?
Yeah, if it's in the corner, just to confirm, try expanding that.
Okay.
This is click up here. We'll click share screen. We'll just make sure. Yeah, and then hit share. Okay.
Okay, so share it and then maximize it. There we go. Thanks. Okay, thank you. Mark Williams, Community Development Department. So this is a public hearing to look at the preliminary subdivision of South Fork Lot 1R-R. It's a little bit of a mouthful. So Lot 1R-R is just a little under 52 acres. It's west of Mercy Hospital, north of Wilson Gulch Drive. And the lots up there are intended to be developed for residential and commercial and institutional, i.e. a church use when everything is said and done. The subdivision will also create the lots that are, sorry, the roads that will serve the new development that's up there. And then I'm sure you remember that earlier this year, City Council approved some of the land use changes to allow the project to happen as it is currently proposed. So here's a map of the, or an aerial of the lot just west of Mercy Hospital. To refresh your memory, these are the uses that were these are the uses that were approved earlier this year. The biggest change was that the northeastern portion of the property was changed to residential high density from commercial. This will allow what is a proposed, at this point, 492 unit apartment complex. And then And this below that, where you can see the same color of orange, but in a different rectangle, is assisted living. And then below that, there's a commercial space that hasn't had a proposed use yet. And then west of the new road, which is Ewing Mesa Drive, is going to be Toyota Motors from Durango Motor Company, and then the church north of that. So Ewing Mesa Drive won't be called Ewing Mesa Drive anymore, since Ewing Mesa doesn't exist anymore, and this won't connect to Ewing Mesa Drive for a while. So it'll probably be called Crater Drive or Crater Ranch Drive. The main road was a subject of some discussion earlier on in the review of this process. So I've got a little bit more detail on how those cross sections are going to look to have a multimodal street that everybody wants to have. Another design feature is that 2 roundabouts will be incorporated into the design that was in the South Fork master plan. It was adopted in 2016. Those will help slow traffic, provide some visual interest, and provide access onto the different parcels. And then the Public Works Department is also evaluating whether some of the water pipes need to be upgraded. This is a copy of the plat itself, the close up on the left. You can see where the right of way for the traffic circles is. And then that's the southern portion of the plat. As I mentioned earlier, this is the street cross section. So originally it was 102-foot cross section. Earlier this year, we reduced that to 90 feet. This is a 2-lane street. I can walk you through this. So what we have is a 10-foot multi-use trail / sidewalk on one side with a large landscape strip. Then this is a travel lane between the curbs. So we have one travel lane with a bike lane, a 10-foot raised median, and then this side looks essentially the same, except that the sidewalk is an 8-foot sidewalk, a little bit smaller with a 13-foot landscape strip. 8 feet is the code requirement for a sidewalk on a road like this, and then the 10-foot is what we like to have for multi-use trails. One thing that's important to note is just to the west of South Fork is High Llama Lane. High Llama Lane is not currently a street, and it's not in the subdivision, but the property owner for South Fork has been working with the property owners west of the South Fork Lot 1R-R to get High Llama Lane converted into a public street. I'll show you a map of that. This is the green is where High Llama Lane is right now. There are 3 property owners who are donating 60 feet of the eastern edges of their properties. That 60-foot width will become High Llama Lane. And it's not quite as simple as that to have all this work together, because there are other properties. You can see these properties, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this one as well. They have access rights to this what is currently an easement. And so just very recently, the property owner, Jack Sheehan, and his team worked with all the property owners, and they've now all signed agreements saying that they're willing to donate their easement rights to High Llama Lane, i.e. They consent in writing for converting High Llama Lane to a public street that allows the city to take the dedication and convert it into a paved public street. So it's a good situation for the city, obviously, and the developers, because there needs to be more than one way in and one way out of this large development. So we have that now, and then the residents there go from having a gravel road to a publicly maintained and paved street. Ewing Mesa or Crater Drive goes up here, and then there's a small segment which is called Tract A on the plat, and that connects to High Llama Lane, and so it loops through, allowing a couple of different points of access. It's going to be a really large development. maybe at full build out, as many as 1,000 people would live here. And that doesn't include the commercial uses, the church as well. So we need to make sure that we have all that infrastructure in place before we proceed. So we do now. And then since we have that, if this is approved, then you'll be seeing the project reviews for the actual developments coming through shortly to City Council and Planning Commission. So this does conform to the strategic plan by creating housing, as well as the land use and development code criteria for subdivisions. We didn't receive any public comments specific to tonight. We have had, the city has hosted a public meeting for the land use changes earlier this year. The applicant did that as well. There were 2 public hearings to talk about the land use changes. Now we've had 2 more public hearings for the subdivision as well. Oh, you know, I did receive a phone call today. Today's my first day back in the office. I've been out for vacation, but I haven't had a chance to return the phone call yet, but someone did call with some concerns about the density. And I don't know if he's here tonight or not, but his name is Tom Stoltz. And I think it's important to add that I did get a comment. So anyway, it's the recommendation of the Community Development Department and the Planning Commission that City Council approve the proposed subdivision with the findings in the staff report and is adopted during the public hearing process. Direct the applicant to submit the final plan for review and authorize the mayor to sign the final plat. That's my presentation. I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mark. We'll take questions after the public hearing. So from council. So is there anyone in the audience who signed up to speak in the public hearing, or do we have anyone? None in the audience. Is there anyone virtually who has raised their hand to speak during the public participation?
No, it does not appear so.
With that, I'll close the public hearing and see if council has any questions of you, Mark.
I don't have any questions. I just think it's great that people are wanting to develop this kind of housing, and also the amenities that are going to go in there too.
Any questions, comments from council? No.
I'll make a motion that we approve the proposed South Fork Lot 1R-R preliminary plan subdivision with the findings in the staff report and as adopted during the public hearing process. Direct the applicant to submit the final plan for review and authorize the mayor to sign the final plat.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Other than just to say thank you for your work and working with the developers on this. May we have the vote?
Counselor Buell,
Yes.
Counselor Baxter,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef,
Yes.
and Mayor Noseworthy.
Yes. Okay, next item 10.2.2, a public hearing regarding the Assay development preliminary plan subdivision. And Mark, you're going to be up there again.
Hello again. This is also a preliminary subdivision on a much smaller scale. This is what's called the Assay development. It's on the southernmost side of southernmost tip of the boulevard, East 3rd Avenue on the west side. This is an aerial of the shot. And so this is a parking lot for the Best Western. This is 3rd Avenue. This is actually has really interesting historical background. This was the Assay house for the Durango Ore Company, I think. It was built around 1890, 1891. So they would test the purity of the mine ore in this building. So it was used for a number of different residential uses. After that, in 2008, the city approved 4 condominiums here. So collectively, what is now a townhouse and the 4 condominiums are known as the Assay development, and it's a total of 5 units. Here's another view. And then we can go back to these if you have any questions or want to take a look at anything more closely. But the request is from the owner of the house, what was the Assay house, who's Kenneth Duncan, who wants to subdivide the properties into 2 lots. As you can see here, he uses the driveway to access his house and park his cars. The people who live in the condominiums, they have their own, you can see it better here, they have their own driveway and subterranean parking underneath their structures. So Mr. Duncan has requested the subdivision in order to split the 2 properties so they're standalone in order to what he feels is a more logical setup for him to maintain his own driveway. If he wants to repave it, he doesn't have to go to the HOA. The HOA doesn't have to spend money for him to pave his own driveway. And so he went to the HOA. This is a copy of the plat, by the way. He went to the HOA meeting in December of last year. The rest of the property owners didn't have a problem with it. They included the copy of their meeting minutes from that HOA board meeting. So I would term it an amicable split. And the one minor complication with this was that two situations that were that needed alternative compliance, which is sort of like a variance, were created by having separate lots. One is by creating the property line between the house and the condominiums. A section of the existing house was now 4 feet from the property line instead of 5 feet from the property line. That's something typically the staff could approve on its own. But the other factor was the floor area ratio, which is a measure of the amount of built surface on a lot to the size of the lot, exceeded what's in the LUDC, and it exceeded it to such an extent that only the design review board could approve that request. So that lot with the condominiums could have up to 0.5 FAR. It had 0.697 FAR. So we went to the design review board earlier this summer, and the board approved it, both requests by a vote of 4-0, and there wasn't much discussion about the issue. And then the last thing I think that's notable is the covenants from the HOA. There's a set of draft covenants that have been updated to reflect the change that's been proposed. So they're set to go if the subdivision gets approved. As with the previous project, this meets the LUDC criteria for preliminary subdivisions. There were no comments about the proposal. Scott McAllister, who owns the Best Western just to the west of the property, had some questions, but he didn't submit any comments. And so it's the recommended motion from Planning Commission, City Council that, from Planning Commission and Community Development, that City Council approve the subdivision with the conditions as listed in the staff report. And as you can see on the screen, the rest of the wording, which is similar to the last project. So.
Thank you. At this time, I'll open the public hearing for this. I do not see any signatures. Do we have anyone virtually who has raised their hand and wishes to speak?
No, Mayor, it does not appear so.
Thank you. We will close the public hearing and open for council questions. No questions from council? Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the Assay preliminary minor subdivision with conditions as listed in the staff report and as may be adopted during the public hearing process. Direct the applicant to prepare the final plan for review and authorize the mayor to sign the final plat milers once all necessary revisions are made.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? Let's have this vote.
Counselor Baxter,
Yes.
Counselor Buell,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef,
Yes.
and Mayor Noseworthy.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Next, we will move to There are no ordinances, so we'll move to item 12, general business items. 12.1, discussion and possible action on a resolution submitting to the registered electors of the city of Durango a ballot issue concerning retention of certain city lodgers tax revenues and approval for the city manager to sign the county intergovernmental agreement. And the city attorney will be presenting on this.
Yes, good evening. This is a review of a resolution that was prepared based on previous council input. This item has been reviewed by council at study sessions and at the previous city council meeting. The resolution does contain specific approval of the city manager to sign the IGA with La Plata County for election services. One of the things that we will need to do if council does not approve the resolution tonight, but that desires to go to an election, we will need to approve separately the authority for city manager to sign that election IGA with the county. So this resolution again contains a ballot question that is largely unchanged from prior drafts. However, it still contains a blank for the proposed uses for retained excess lodgers fund. Just to remind everyone that were excess funds collected over the estimate that was made in 2021 in the approximate amount of $684,000. Current estimates are that there will be excess collections in 22 in the range of $420,000 over the Tabor estimates. That's down slightly from the prior estimates based on lower than expected July collections of this year. This resolution has been amended to add a new paragraph 7 to provide that any refund of excessive collections in 21 would, due to a negative vote on the ballot question in November, is assuming council wants to proceed with that ballot question, will be accomplished prior to the end of 22 by a proportionate credit on all city residential utility accounts. That follows the direction of council at the last meeting. So at this point, again, Jared Biggs is here to assist in presenting quickly. We'll run through some slides to give some background, some additional background information, and also to provide some additional language that we hope may assist council in making a decision. I'll pause for a moment and see if anyone has questions before we move into the slide presentation. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so just to recap where we're at to date, and as Dirk aptly stated, the combined 21 and 22 is down a little bit from our last update based on July collections to an aggregate total of about $1.1 million. And if we were to leave the distribution as it currently is, as it was previously voted on in 2021, these would be the apportionments that would exist for those purposes. So just as food for thought. An amended allocation, as we had talked last time, would be to remove marketing and just apportion to the other purposes, that additional sum. This would be that apportionment as well. So just removing marketing, still funding transit, arts and culture, and the council determination bucket. As I believe Tom had shared with you, we did have significantly more input or feedback from the more recent lodgers tax survey, number 2. There were 490 responses. Housing came up to the top with 233 first place votes, so to speak, followed by transportation and then arts and culture. And back to what Dirk had mentioned, we have just prepared 3 slides with optional ballot language that would be available to you.
Yeah, I would just remind council that this ballot question as drafted provides for retention of both excess revenues from 21 and from 22. Again, there's been some changes here. The red line, there's blue lines. I don't know why they came out this way, but blue lines or for additions and red lines, obviously for deletions. So this is a slide of the previous ballot language that effectively authorizes the retention and expenditure of the excess from both years for the approved purposes that were in the ballot language in 2021. And then this one would is an option to allow for the retention and expenditure again of both years 21 and 22 solely for the purposes of affordable and workforce housing programs. That language, again, affordable and workforce housing programs, discussed that with community development and that this was the language that they thought would provide for enough specificity, but still some flexibility in providing for affordable and workforce housing programs. Then we have one more. Again, these are just suggested options. This one would substitute the workforce housing expenditures for the previously approved marketing portion of the language that was approved in 21. So the 55% was previously approved for sustainable tourism would instead be spent for affordable and workforce housing programs.
Yeah.
We could go back to that. Yeah. 595. Yeah. Yeah. So again, keeping in mind that this ballot, the resolution needs to be approved no later than September the 6th, because the deadline to submit that language for the ballot question is actually September the 9th. So keeping in mind that we, assuming council wants to approve a resolution tonight, we'll need to complete language that follows the intent of council. So we did offer some options that, well, they are just options. It does give some language that we can work from if you want to fine tune that tonight.
Could I see that first one for again? That one.
Again, this retains the allocation that was approved in 21.
Second just goes to workforce housing, affordable.
Entirely to affordable and workforce housing. The third one substitutes. Yeah, substitutes. That's right. Substitutes.
So it's
the other.
transportation, arts and culture, and council. So you'd only get the 595 would be available for housing, and the other allocations would go.
But it says sustainable tourism marketing right there.
Or it was used, except for the 55 for sustainable tourism, that would be and shall instead be used for affordable and workforce housing.
Interesting.
So the issue would be, just so we're all clear, 590, if this one were the language that were approved, 595,000 would be available for workforce housing. With item number 2, if that were approved, 1.1 million would be available for workforce housing, affordable and workforce housing.
Of course, the final number will be determined, won't be determined until the end of 22.
Still get arts and culture, right?
One other thing I want to make clear This ballot language only impacts the excess collections in 21 and 22. It will not impact the allocations going forward. So if council desires to seek a reallocation, that's something that would not be impacted by this ballot language.
So I'll open it up to thoughts from council on purpose. Or anything else that you might want to add.
I'll start just I was glad we got a few more responses to the survey the last go around. It showed me though that, you know, like transportation, I think parking especially from all the emails we've gotten, and housing and arts and culture are all very much important, which kind of brought me back to the the existing allocations. And I've always been a proponent of, like, we finally got on the same page. It was years of work to get it, everyone to even go forward with an increase in lodgers tax. And so I kind of go back to that, like, thought process for me of trying to keep somewhat, at least on the same allocation methodology of what was originally passed. I like the idea of potentially housing it going in for marketing because it is important. But I also think that if we go to what's the next, can you go to the next slide, Jared? The council determined proportions, the 11% that we have now plus this, that could also be something that we say, this is important to us. It wasn't in the election. This is what we're going to choose to spend it on, is workforce housing. That's interesting you should say that. So go back to the item. No, you can, no, I don't mind. I don't mind dialogue. I love dialogue. I always interrupt. Go ahead. Oh, right. So, but then, okay, so all these things, right? There's lots of options that we can like sit here and talk about. I'm just saying, one, I think I'm leaning more going back towards that original allocation for those reasons. However, I think it's so important for the for the ballot language that it's so simple and like it's not so confusing. And that's because I think that if it's confusing, it's not going to pass. And that's where I get nervous about changing anything, to be honest, rather than just saying, can we keep the money and put it towards as it was originally allocated? So those are just kind of my initial thoughts. Not that I won't have more after you guys speak, or while you speak. No, I'm just kidding.
Can I see number 3 one more time? It's interesting that you don't lay out in this one what the other goes for.
Well, we certainly an option to say, certainly an option just to lay out all of the percentages again. And when I was drafting this, I considered that. Actually, to the point that Councilor Buell just made, it makes for a very long ballot question. That's fine. So if you would prefer to delineate again all of the previously approved uses, we could do that. But this just says, may we, spend such excess revenues from the lodgers tax for the purposes as directed by the voters in 21, except. So again, it was really intended to be a little more.
And I think that's
to the point.
important, like for the purposes as directed by the voters in 2021. Like, I like that. And it's simple. No, I'm saying, no, I'm not sold on them. And like I said, I'm not sold on the marketing portion of it. I think we've heard from even like Visit Durango and that they are fine and we'll be behind on the overage with whatever we feel like, if it's housing or whatever, like I'm fine with that. I just think a ballot measure that's confusing, the fact that you like got confused on it, that is concerning to me. Not that you got, but like lots of people could get confused on it. And I think that that allows for room for failure of the ballot measure. Does that make sense? Okay.
So would you go back to the one, that's, I think what you're supporting that. I don't know,
No.
no.
Okay, I know, and I'm being kind of confusing. So I'm supporting, this is just as like it is with like marketing. This is marketing. This is transportation, arts and culture, and council approved, just like 2021. I like that it's simple and that it's, you know, voters approved it. We want to keep the money for this, cut and dry. I don't think that this excess revenue right now should be used to marketing. I personally, from all the feedback that we've been seeing, would like to see it go to parking, whether that's a parking garage to solve all the parking issues that we've had, or because I think that that's a huge impact that tourism has on us. And it's seen in our community very vividly, and workforce housing, which we've all said we're behind. So I would advocate for those 100%. I'm just saying, I'm just talking a lot and no one else is.
Let me just say, I don't think it's a one-time speak. I think we're gonna go around, and I think we may influence each other. So that you're fine.
I'm trying to be clear, but I know I'm not being very clear because it's hard. I think it's not an easy question. I support what the voters passed. I support that it took a lot of work to get there. I support that so many different entities were involved with it. So I support the allocation that was passed by voters, which is why I am not personally advocating for all of it to go to workforce housing. Does that make sense? Okay.
So right now, it might sound like option 3 for you. It might. Other thoughts?
Can I see option 3 again? Sorry. All right, I'm happy to go. I was really happy to see the survey as well. And I want to thank staff for taking the time to put that together and sending it out. And despite some, some suggested, people were not super always excited, in support of the survey. And it accomplished for me what I was hoping it would accomplish, which was some input from the community on what it was that they wanted to see supported. I was happy to see just, a lot of support for the issues that as council we've talked about so much: housing and parking, and continued support of arts and culture. It's all really kind of in line with what we were thinking, and that gives me better hope that a ballot, might pass by the voters. People are recognize, we got enough responses that anyway, it gives me some hope. I think that we've also heard, I agree, Councillor Buell, that we've heard a lot about parking. We know there's a lot about housing. And based on the results of the survey, I think I'm leaning towards maybe this third option. But I think we need to, and the third option, putting the amount of money towards workforce housing, the 595, and then leaving the other as is, as approved by the voters. But I think we need to clarify what that is. I think we need to clarify, be really as clear as we can be in the language, is my thought.
Okay.
That's what I would like to see it go for. I think, keeping basically half of it as the voters approved in the ballot, and then the other half towards housing, as we have seen from the survey, is kind of where I'm leaning.
So when the original ballot language was done, we projected our revenues that would come for that, and projected what would go to each of the segments: marketing, transportation, arts and culture, and council determination. And that dollar amount is going to those 4 sections. So exactly what the community thought was going to happen has happened. But we have additional collections that weren't what we were projecting. So I think that the 4 groups that we and that the community supported to a certain dollar amount, I think that commitment has been met and that expectation has been met. And I think this is a true opportunity for us to do something to, first of all, when we talk about housing, affordable and workforce housing, we've put some money in through ARPA funds, upfront one-time money to get some projects started and going, housing division and some other things. And our challenge is that we don't have a dedicated funding source for housing. And we have several options for creating such a dedicated funding source, long-term dedicated funding source, but those aren't quite available to us yet. Like maybe the 2005 re-up is a possibility. So I feel, as I mentioned last time, that I think that this is a really good bridge between the ARPA funding and us creating a long-term funding source to support affordable and working housing, workforce housing. This is not an ongoing source. It's kind of one of that one-time intermediate source for housing. So, and I think that $595,000, we would be better off doubling that and making it the 1.1 million, putting it into housing. And I'm really happy that Visit Durango supports housing, because I think you guys and the people that you work with and the people you represent understand that they don't have employees without housing, and that our employees shouldn't have to drive to New Mexico to live, or even outside of the city necessarily by 20 or 30 miles, you know, Aztec. So I really appreciate that. And I think that's marvelous. So thank you. And the other thing is that for me personally, I see housing as the key to the future quality of life of our community. I see a multi-generational and mixed income community as something that keeps the qualities that we all appreciate in Durango and that we moved here for, and that we want to be here for the next 10 and 20 years and longer. So I really support this all going to affordable and workforce housing.
Option 2, correct? I'll jump in with my thoughts. And again, thank you for putting together the slides and everything. You know, back in 2019, I remember I went to my first meeting of the Economic Alliance, and they were like, is it broadband? Is that what we should be focusing on? Is it broadband? Is it the airport? And I said at the time, the elephant in the room is housing. We don't have place for people to live who work here. And then this past week, I've been chatting with people and I'm hearing stories again of folks not being able to keep their restaurants open certain days because they have no workers, or all over. It's not just the hospitality industry, but throughout it. And this is a problem not unique to Durango. I mean, almost every city in the United States is dealing with this, and it's not something that the market is going to address. It's going to be addressed by proactive choices, policy choices that we make. I also believe that we've started money for housing, and Ava and the colleagues have been putting that to good use. And we have very little left in that account to put toward housing. This is a funding source that will give us some time while we actually develop a plan for more dedicated funding, whether that's the 2005 sales tax or some other function. So for me, this is all about housing. For me, it's an opportunity to show the community that we're hearing them, we're aware of their concerns, we're aware of our businesses who don't have people to live here and work. And this is one policy step that we can take to provide approximately 1.1 million available if this vote passes. So I support option number 2.
So Dirk, you need to know for sure today what option, or if the city manager has to submit this to the county, correct?
Right, so.
And so no matter what option we choose, 2 or 3, that's the case we support, correct?
Well, to be clear, you could wait until September the 6th to make the decision on the expenditures. What we would have to do tonight is separately approve the entry of the IGA with the county for the election.
Right, which I think we can agree to that.
Which means obligating the money. I just,
yeah.
Because even if even if we decided, okay, now, no, we don't want to do a ballot measure, we would have already obligated ourselves to.
Well, only to the amount that is expended prior to the time you.
Okay.
So you can make the decision. So as a practical matter, we're probably not going to be obligated for any funds. It's just a deadline that they have for their agreement so that they can begin to work towards. So there could be, we would probably commit to expend some funds if the county clerk expends funds moving towards the election, but it'd be a relatively small amount initially.
Okay, so if we want,
My point is that all 4 of us are supporting going to an election in some way with a ballot. And so we can approve that tonight, easy peasy, no problem. And then if the ballot language doesn't get there, then we can do that on the 6th when we have a 5th counselor potentially to help develop that. Decide that.
I'd like to clarify. I think it's, I guess I would like to say, I'm supporting a ballot measure. If for me, I feel very strongly, and I don't want it to be necessarily threatening, but if it's, I feel so strongly about it being workforce housing that's why I can support this ballot measure. If it's a variety of things, or if I feel the language is unclear, then it's harder for me. And so I want to, hear what everybody has to say, but I also don't necessarily want us to go down something. And then if it's something for a purpose that I find difficult, I'd want some options.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, yeah, but but if you don't do a ballot, yeah. That's a really good point, Mayor. I probably wouldn't support any other ballot measure than affordable and workforce housing.
I would, because I saw enough response from the survey to suggest that there's a lot of people who also support transportation and parking and arts and culture. So
for me, the trying to say how to word this. I 100% support workforce housing across the board. I've seen, just even in the last presentation with the 400 units coming up potentially in that crater development, like housing is happening and we're helping it with our commitment with Eva and then finding some dedicated funding. And we haven't even said where we're going to put our council directed funding yet. That's so important. Like we should be doing that and providing that. And so to say that it's like this or refund the voters, I feel like when I sat there and saw all those applications come through the CEC for triple the amount of money we had and what that could even do to our community to help enhance it, like to say that it's all or nothing is a little bit like no common ground and not seeing that there is so many things that the impacts of tourism that can be relieved and we can use this money to benefit our community. And when I voted on this original ballot language, I know that the amount of money was there, but it was never a thought in my head where, okay, marketing gets exactly this amount of money and not a penny more. And arts and culture gets this amount of money. So to say that you fulfilled that, like it's a percentage. And I don't think we've fulfilled. I think there's so much more we can do with money in arts and culture and transportation and all those things. And yes, workforce housing. Yes, that can be a part of it. And what we can do with $500,000, if you can get the rest of council on board, is way better than what you can't get than not getting anything out of it, I guess. Does that make sense to me? And so that's a little bit kind of, for me, it's like $1 million to housing or nothing is a little, I would never go that route. I don't think at all.
The other interesting thought, that I'm looking at in the third option is that, you've got 595 for marketing plus potentially the other. So you're over 700. But then you're adding to that, which has also been approved prior by the voters of the arts and culture and transit and parking, which also is an impact, that we're hitting on from the tourists. So it seems to make sense. That's why I'm in support of that, is it makes a lot of sense. It addresses the housing. If you look at, we spent $500,000 for the mobile home park. It allows a project like that, for example, or the deed restricted housing that we're doing at the Animas Park Overlook for $600,000. It would allow a project like that, but still addresses the other impacts of the larger.
Not to mention the current 11% that we have.
Well, would you be willing
allocated.
to then, in the ballot language, then would you be willing to take that 11% and actually put it into housing? So it was housing, transportation, and arts and culture with no council determination? I'm asking Melissa.
I think I would. I think I would be willing to do that. But I don't want to make it complicated.
Right. No, that actually, it simplifies it.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting item. I wonder if as part of this messaging, if the council could allocate, Jerry, can you give us a sense of, with the money that we can spend, is that the 100,000 or that would be the additional of that 11% council determination? How much is that right now? And so the question would be, would council be willing to say, we are going to allocate of the 11%, we're going to allocate that for workforce housing. Plus we're going to take the 55 and the new so I'm trying to get to more than that 100,000, right? Because
But Barbara, so that could be a different conversation. I don't think we can do that in this ballot conversation.
No, but I think as part of the messaging, if council would decide to spend that money, and if you can give us an estimate of how much that would be.
I think approximately current receipts in the council determination bucket is $180,000 this year.
So then you're looking at 300,000 with 600,000, you're looking at 900,000. So as part of the messaging, which would be council is going to use, has agreed, not tonight, but has agreed to allocate.
We could tonight, maybe.
Or it could be tonight, has agreed to allocate the 11% to workforce housing. And we will dedicate, the council determinant of 120, if that's the case, for workforce housing. That's a little different than what you just said. But basically, if this passed, we would have an estimate of 900,000 going to workforce housing, which is kind of that compromise, which is.
Barbara, are you talking about the 1.1 million that we're talking about right here?
No, I'm saying
Or are you
that
talking about
She's adding in the current 11% that we have accumulated already that we haven't allocated. And
Okay, but that would not be in the ballot question.
no, but it would be in the messaging of how we talk about this. We'd say, look, it's so important. We're going to dedicate this much money to workforce housing already.
Going forward?
And we're going to add to it if you approve
Well,
this
that-
allocation.
I don't think that's a discuss.
I'm not sure you can commit prior councils.
Well,
future
no,
councils.
we haven't done a budget for that 11% yet. We haven't allocated it in any way, shape or form yet.
Yeah.
So we have that option.
But
let's keep this.
Yeah,
it would
let's
be.
keep it simple.
Let's talk about the ballot question.
So what we're saying is instead we'll add that 53.9% and the 10.7%. So what, 55% would be to workforce housing, and then 19.6 to transit and 13.72 to arts and culture. And that would be the
numbers in the original ballot question were actually, this is accounting for the administration fees.
Oh, okay.
Here it would be the original allocation for 55 for marketing, 20% for transportation and transit, 14 for arts and culture, and 11 for council determined. So what I understood.
So 66%. Yeah.
So 66% would be housing.
Yes. And then
20% transportation and 14% arts and culture. So we three categories of step forward. You want to spell those out.
I think that accept comment is so confusing. I don't think people are going to know what they're voting for. Item 3, I think what you're saying.
go to the second question that you had. So it would be similar to this one, except for at the affordable and workforce housing programs, you list the 3 sections that we just did. It would be this question, except for those 3 sections. Percent. Yeah. 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 I would support that.
I think that's an interesting option. What I would like to ask of this council, we're not going to vote tonight, but I would like to ask us, well, not, we can vote on this tonight, but I would like us to consider very soon a discussion of how to spend the money we've collected that allows for council determination, so that we can, at some point in time, even in the beginning of September, saying, this is what we're doing. It's not some money in some pocket that we're not spending. We are so committed. We will. So that's a separate discussion, but I think the timing of it is important.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to put that in the next study session. Yeah.
Or
How about you, Melissa?
I would be too.
Yeah.
I think
Chief-
that's the kind of discussion we can get to.
Chief,
reach
can we add that
compromise.
to Jose's list to put on potentially a study session in the future?
The current.
I think it can be a
11%
vote.
Council determination.
Oh, right. No,
fee.
I'm just telling him to put that on.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a study session though.
So back to the ballot language. Is it possible, Dirk, on this? I feel like we're kind of leaning towards a potential solution here. Maybe. Is there a way to word the ballot language such that we can not do just lay it out with positives instead of the accept? Okay.
And I can read what I understand.
Okay.
What I understand what Council's talking about. So it would read, and may the city spend such excess revenues collected from the lodger's tax as follows. It would be 66% for affordable and workforce housing programs, 20% for transportation and transit services, equipment, and facilities, in languages before, 14% for arts and cultural events, programs, and facilities. It says transportation and transit services, equipment, and facilities, so I think a transit service would be right.
I think the word
we want
parking,
that
I
word
think
put
the word
parking in
parking
there?
has to be in there.
Let's add
Can we
parking
add
in
the
there
word
just,
parking?
just so people.
Yeah, that's we had support for that.
Transportation, parking, and transit services. So that language substituted for.
Okay, I'll make a motion to direct the city manager to go enter into an IGA with the county for what? For
Actually, I think if you prefer to adopt a resolution.
okay, adopt the resolution and then do that.
Yeah, resolution number R 2022-37.
2022 dash what? 37. Okay. Okay. Go ahead. In the discussion that council had today. Do you want me to, do you have it written?
I'll have to draft this to make sure we're clear. So substituting the following language for affordable workforce housing programs would be to read collected from the lodger's tax for the following purposes: 66% for sustainable, 66% for affordable and workforce housing programs, 20% for transportation, parking, and transit services, equipment, and facilities, 14% for arts and cultural events, programs, and facilities.
So moved. Does that work? Can I do that? Okay.
I'll second.
Does anyone have anything to say?
I think that's a really good compromise,
Thank you.
and it hits on the topics that were supported, that we've heard have support, and I'm excited about that. I think it's good. I feel good about it.
Me too.
And I'd like to compliment my counselors on this, because I think we put out our position and how we feel, but then part of any negotiation, right, is the back and forth and where does it come? But you need to know where people are starting and what they feel. So I am very pleased and appreciate the work from staff, but also the dialogue that takes place here on the dais. Thank you. Can we have the vote?
Counselor Baxter,
Absolutely, yes.
Counselor Buell,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Youssef.
Yes.
And Mayor Noseworthy.
Yes. With a reminder that we've agreed as council to bring the allocation of the existing 11% to council for a discussion. And the expectation right now is that it would be around housing. Very soon. Okay, boards and commissions. Natural Lands Preservation, Parks and Rec. I had a brief IAB meeting. Did anybody else have some that they? Chamber, okay. That's right. We ended at somewhere around 10:40, something like that. So other previous meetings, thank you.
I'll go quick just because most of mine was done. So I had the Creative Economy Commission, but the majority of what we talked about, Tommy presented on today. The applications, the process, the awarding of the 19 different projects. It was super exciting. We talked about the Common Threads project, and we're going to go out to bid one more time in the spring to try to get it installed. And then today we talked about potentially trying to piggyback that off with a potential replacement of the Arc of History. So we'll see how that goes. And then I had the Airport Commission meeting. They had 3 competitive submittals for CMAR. They're in evaluations and they're going to arrive at a selection toward the beginning of August. So I'm sure we'll hear about that in our next Airport Commission meeting, which is Thursday. I think there's a nationwide pilot shortage. We heard a big presentation on that, and it's led to airlines, the pricing going up, using higher gauge aircraft to maintain capacity, but reduce pilot hours, which is also a cost for prices going up, tons of cancellations. It's kind of just all over. It's not just Durango, it's nationwide. And I sent you guys out that article or whatever it was that Tony sent out. So that was interesting. But despite reductions, DRO still compares favorably to its peers around us. So that's good. And then we've pulled back a little bit. We were outpacing the national average quite significantly and substantially, but now we're just right about to national average. So that's 2 updates. That's what I had.
Thank you very much. Others? You had a chamber?
Yes. I had a chamber meeting today, and just a quick update, they reviewed their guidelines on housing, and they asked me to kind of review the draft with Dr. Karen Chesser from 9R. So I worked with Scott Shine and Eva on these housing policies, and we so to make sure that any recommendations that I made were in line with the city, I provided them with the red line version, and basically kind of what we did was we kind of made the language a little bit more representative of some of the housing initiatives that we are implementing here as a city, some of the efforts that are being done in our housing department, and we kind of added those into the policy. And also, just so you know, that in these policies, they have issues that the chamber supports and issues that the chamber opposes. They were opposing fees from our fair share ordinance, and they were also opposing any imposition of real estate transfer taxes. I did have a conversation with them about both of those. And of course, we don't do the transfer tax because we can't do transfer taxes, but we do in Durango do the transfer fees in Twin Buttes and in Three Springs. So we talked a lot about that. And I asked them to reconsider their opposition, as These are some of our significant funding sources for housing. And I got information from them that I believe the transfer fees from Twin Buttes, we've raised $394,000 year to date on that, and Three Springs, $874,000. Those are important sources of funding. So I asked them to reconsider that. We'll see. They'll decide next month. But I did want you to just keep you guys informed about that. And that was really it. We have a library advisory board meeting tomorrow that I'll be attending.
Councilor Baxter?
So I just wanted to bring you up to date on the RHA meeting. We've had 6 applicants now, and we will be interviewing the last one tomorrow. And then I believe it's tomorrow. If it's not, it's on Thursday. And then at our meeting, our RHA board meeting on September 1st, we will be discussing whatever candidates the hiring committee has puts forward. So it's possible that on September 1st, we may have an executive director or not, just FYI. The Economic Alliance, I think you've all heard about the Catalyst Fund. And I believe that the Economic Alliance will be coming to the city to be making a asking them to help contribute to that. This county has committed $250,000 to it. So I believe we'll be hearing from them soon. And they have a fairly large possible contributor to that coming down the pike and having conversations with them. So that's pretty exciting. And then I also wanted to say that the Alliance, or the Economic Alliance Summit, is on September 21st. And so they have a really great lineup, and that's about all I have to say.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to give some feedback on the Infrastructure Advisory Board. And you have to understand, I appreciate when the opening question at one of our recent meetings was, I want to talk about the mechanical integrity of the raw water feed line. So you have to appreciate the level that this advisory board brings to really looking at making certain our sewer and water systems and our streets are functional. Mainly, we covered a lot of this in the study session today, but the advisory board really went into some detail over the proposed projects in the CIP for water and sewer, as well as the streets. And I think that informed council, at least shared their thinking with council today. So I appreciate the role and the staffing that's involved with that. That's it for the meetings. I did want to make one a plug, if you will. Up at Fort Lewis College, there's a great exhibit in the Southwest Center for Studies on Seeds of Change. It was curated by a former student. It's students, Indigenous students who have brought their work, and students and alumni who've brought their work, and it's on exhibit up there, and it'll be there most of this year. So please take a chance, take an opportunity to get up there and see this work. Anything else from anyone? On that note, we'll end this meeting just before 8 p.m.
Thank you.